Okay, so we're ready to begin. So it doesn't actually say on your agenda, but we are having to do appointment of chair and vice chair. The chair has been in place for 2 years, so it is time to appoint a new chair, or obviously the same chair. So can I have any nominations for chair, please?
Can I come in on this, knowing where we are at the moment, and I'm sure that other people as well, not knowing what is an update on where we are at the moment. I would very much like to say that I'd like Roger to carry on knowing the times that we are in at the moment, because he's done very well and knows what is going on at the moment. So I propose that Roger stays in the chair.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second it. Thank
Okay,
you.
fantastic. And are there any other nominations? Okay, no other nominations. Okay, so I will read out your names in turn. So if you just say for or against. So Roger Boone. Councillor Chris Cater.
Yeah, in favour.
Jenny Downs.
For.
Councillor Mary Doyle.
For.
Annest Gray Fraser.
It's enough.
Julia
Three.
Buckley Jones.
Hello.
Or
Councillor Abdul Khan.
Blind.
In favour.
Colette, sorry, I didn't hear that.
Or.
For, okay, thank you very much. Hugh Roberts.
As proposed.
Yeah, I believe that's everybody. Nicholas, I don't think you get to vote because you're a co-opted member, but yeah, that's carried. So Roger will continue as chair.
Okay, we need a vice chair now. I just want to open if you've read the strategic plan, I think I'd like to open up the possibility, although Abdul's done an excellent job, of actually having one of our professional teachers as the vice chair. So I'm not prepared to make, obviously, a proposal myself, but I'd like you to consider that as a possibility, because it would enable me to deal with the strategic plan I've laid down for the next meeting more effectively. That's all. So proposals, please.
Would Julia be able to do it? He's on mute.
sorry, I'm going to suggest Colette. It's just that because we are in a pandemic, I feel I've got so much on really in school, trying to keep the school safe and the children. I don't feel at this juncture I could really take on it. I will if I need to, but I would rather not, if that's okay at the moment, just because of the workload really with everything else. So perhaps Colette would do it. She's a professional. Or Philip.
Phil, no, Phil. Phil?
Sorry, Colette is unable to stand because Roger represents the faith organisation, or the committee, and so does Colette. We can't have two people from the same committee as vice and as chair. Sorry, Julia.
No, it's okay. What about Hugh?
Same faith committee.
Well, at the moment, I don't really feel I could, to be honest, take on anything else. Sorry. I mean, I'm happy to help out in any way I can. You know that, and I always would, but I don't feel I can at this juncture. Sorry.
There is a possibility of deferring appointment of vice chair to the next meeting if you can't come to a decision.
Abdul.
Yeah, I would. If no one's is interested, I would like to ask Councillor, or if she's agreed to, Councillor Mary Doyle to take over as a vice chair.
I don't think I could.
No.
No.
I'd be happy to defer this actually until we've looked at the strategic plan, and it'll become very clear then why I'm making that particular proposal. That probably would make sense, and also with a possible wider attendance, we could make an informed decision then. Hugh.
On mute.
Hugh. On mute, Hugh. You?
Yeah, okay. I'm all right now. Maybe that's, if we got a strategic plan, we need maybe, okay, we can carry on with whoever you want as vice chair, but you need maybe a smaller group, maybe the chair and vice chair, and maybe 2 professionals for you to contact to discuss a way forward before you bring things to a larger meeting.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose. If you look at the strategic plan, inherent in that plan is that proposal you've just made.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we need to look at the plan first, because we're not going to make any decisions about it. It's a way forward. We'll all be aware what's involved in it, and there might very well at that point people say, well, we'd like to be part of a group to take it forward, because the connection with the LA within that is absolutely key. And that's one of the reasons why I was hoping she might be here today. In fact, that, oh gosh, Julie Fallon, who's the cabinet member of education, is actually now a member of this group. So I'd still like to defer it on that basis if possible here. Okay, is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, can I just have a seconder for that, please? Yeah, okay, that's fine, thank you.
Right, okay. Well, big welcome to all of you. It's a new experience for me, certainly. I've been in many meetings, but I've not chaired one. So it is a different experience from that point of view. I'd like to welcome in particular Jenny Downs, who's new, who's the Anglican Diocesan St. Asaph's Education Officer. So welcome, Jenny. Good to have you on board. And Anest, who's representing the Church in Wales from the Bangor Diocese. So warm welcome to you, Anest. And Chris, I think you're new, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm brand new. I've never been to a meeting before. Nice to meet you all, and congratulations, Roger, on becoming chair. I've been looking forward to this meeting because, as we know, we've been suspended in limbo for a while, haven't we? And it's been a long time coming since Romwe asked me to come on board with you all. So I'll probably be very quiet today, Roger.
I take that's not typical, therefore, from the fact that you're saying it. Yeah, okay. I need to advise you that the meeting is being recorded, and you've all been told that all microphones will be muted unless you wish to speak. So it's particularly important for the speed of the meeting that when you do that, you do unmute. And you've already selected your language of choice. So, Sally, any apologies for absence?
Yeah, apologies received from Ian Gerard and Ariane Pierce.
Thank you. And any declarations of interest from members? It would be most unusual, particularly important to ask at the beginning of a new committee. So thank you for that. I'm not aware of any urgent matters. Anybody else?
No, not aware of any, Chair.
Okay. We need to approve the minutes of the meeting held on 14th of November. And I will ask, I'll beg a bit of license here today, because we had one meeting, because of all the difficulties that most of you are aware of. We only had one meeting in the last calendar year and the one before. So, and the last time we had a catch up, the meeting went on for 4 hours because we were cramming a whole year's work into a single meeting. So I'll try and be as speedy as possible. And Phil and I, because of that, have met before to try and take it through as quickly as possible. But there is a lot to get through, so I hope you will, therefore, bear with me. With regard to amendments, could we make sure that in all future, Sally's aware of this, Phil isn't our advisor any longer, he's a consultant, and he services this committee. If he was an advisor, he'd have a network, a full-time job, accessing all our teachers and schools. That is not the case for those of you who knew at all. All he does is help me to service the particular group with his enormous professional background that he brings to the table. So could we change that, please, in the minutes, wherever it appears? And if you look at, I think it's page 13, it says at the bottom of that, that the, it's not, not page, it must be section 13. It says in the minutes that we noted the previous annual report, which means that we hadn't agreed it. We did actually agree it. Otherwise, we'd have to spend this part of this meeting going through it and agreeing it. I'm sure you don't want to do that. So could we alter that as well, please? Thank you. Is that okay, Sally?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so I propose that. If I could have a second, please. Thanks, Julia. Thank you. Okay. Matters arising. We could turn to that. We have bulleted a number on the agenda. First of all, collaborative working with Denbighshire County Council. You might recall that we actually set up the possibilities of working regionally, and that was investigated. And for reasons, and we actually partly went through with that. But Phil, would you like to just talk to us about the problems that we found in relationship to that?
Yeah, so we met in the autumn term last year and we proposed that we work together with Denbighshire and possibly do some collaborative meetings for SACRE. So one was arranged in the spring term, but due to clerking services and voting within the two different SACREs, it made it very difficult to actually hold a meeting and run the business within SACRE for voting, clerking, minutes, etc. So what happened, I think Denbighshire said that they didn't or they couldn't provide the clerking services for a Conwy meeting. And we met with Dr. Lowry Brown. Hello, Doctor. We met with Dr. Lowry Brown in the spring term to discuss the collaborative working with Denbighshire. And sort of we talked about the issues and the problems with clerking, and it was agreed that we would carry on with our own meetings in Conwy. And so we attended, or the chair and a couple of others attended the Denbighshire meeting as visitors just to see what was going on. Yeah, Colette. But Colette also sits on the Denbighshire SACRE as well. And so we attended that meeting, and then because of the COVID coming in mid-March, our meeting that we arranged within the spring term as a result of the meeting with Dr. Lowry, we were then unable to meet in the spring as a Conwy SACRE, and we've not met since. So collaborative working, we will continue to distribute a newsletter with Denbighshire, and there might be some working that we can do in collaboration with them, but in terms of business meetings and voting, we will need to continue with a Conwy SACRE. Yeah.
You'll also note that we were going to raise, we had agreed at the last meeting that we were going to raise the whole issue of access to data with the local authority, on the basis that we got no basis for making judgments about what was going on in schools in relationship to examination performance. Dr. Larry Brown was pretty adamant that was not possible, certainly at this stage, because this was the policy of national government and that's what they were actually obeying. So that's a no-no at the moment, although it does feature as an item looking ahead in the strategic plan as how we can best access some kind of estimate of what's happening in our schools. So elsewhere on the agenda, there was a possible, I'd spoken to the local canteen in Llandudno, and they'd raised the possibility of supporting a bursary for Llandudno schools. We had then taken back from our last meeting that we thought £2,000 would be a good sum. I discovered when I reported back, in fact, that that's their whole budget for the year. So it wasn't going to be £2,000, and they're going to look at that again. If you look under item 82, support for SACREs was discussed at WASACRE, and I'm going to ask Phil to actually talk about that when we get to the WASACRE report, rather than take it out of the minutes. Okay. On that basis, unless there's anything else that people want to raise at this particular point, because I think everything else is included in the programme for today, I'd like on that basis to go ahead. Is that okay?
Can I, Roger, dwi'n mynd i siarad Cymraeg rwan.
I'm going to speak Welsh now. And part 83 talks about the vice chair's powers. The vice chair's is talking about that. Did we have a vice chair there? Because it's not in the list at the moment. The second bullet point up from on page 10.
On page 10.
Yeah. Rhai bwled I fyny.
The second bullet point up, the vice chair
It's not on page 10.
suggested on.
Well, the Welsh page must be different.
Is it a different
it's
bullet
the
point in
third.
the
It's
English?
the third
Sorry.
bullet point up. The vice chair suggested possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did we have a vice chair? It's not on the list. I'm just going back to what we did at the beginning of the meeting.
Sorry, I'm not with this at all. I'm on page 10.
So at the last meet, sorry, is it you're just checking that there was a vice chair present at the last meeting? Yes, it was Councillor Abdul Khan.
Yeah.
And he was present at the meeting. Yeah.
Okay. So fine. Okay. So Abdul could carry on then as a.
Yeah, that's certainly a potential, and Abdul and I have already spoken about that possibility as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just looking at the item 83. No, my apologies. I jumped here. I was actually still working my way through the minutes. There were some items which weren't actually being subsumed. We actually discussed whether there should be an action plan, which is the reason why you find the strategic plan now on the agenda. We referred to our contact with Katine. The self-evaluation is on the agenda. And Phil, we actually made something we promised to do, but we actually said that we would make contact with the chairs of Gwynedd, Anglesey and Flintshire in relationship to future joint meetings. You've talked about Denbighshire. What was the feedback on that?
The feedback was quite positive. They were very interested in the newsletter, and in the initial conversation, they were quite open to the idea of it being shared and used across the two authorities. I didn't hear from Flintshire, and Wrexham, again, interested, but possibly not for the current time. We then went straight into sort of the COVID issues, and I've not heard from them since, other than the newsletter is very... there is a bit in it, as you'll have noticed, that talks about vacancies on Conwy and Denbighshire SACRE, which obviously would be irrelevant over in the West. Whether they'd want to include those in the future, I don't know. So initially, the contact was positive. I will contact them again regarding whether they want the newsletter to be distributed across their schools. We have it translated, it's ready and available in both languages, so it wouldn't be an issue, and we could send it straight out. So I will contact them again.
Thanks very much, Phil, for that. Okay, well, perhaps we can move to item 6 at this particular point. I mentioned the strategic plan. The purpose of this meeting is really only to announce that that would be the key thing that we would need to look at. over the course of the next year or so. I'm just been very, very discouraged, and you'll probably realise that from my introduction to the annual report, that this in fact is essentially become a talking shop, and it doesn't actually produce, now particularly now Phil is no longer an advisor able to access our schools, it doesn't actually produce a great deal. So I want to look at the mechanisms, therefore, by how we achieve our aims, and those aims are clearly set out in that annual report. And I also want to actually look at how we can really become much more effective. And it seems to me the key to that is our integration with the local education authority on the education side. And the local education authority do produce an education plan, and what we decide or advise should be integrated into that plan, in my view, if it's going to have any effect. In other words, we decide, advise here, that's put forward, we never get any feedback on what's actually happened, but if it's into the plan as part of their process, that will become very, very effective. So have a look at that. There's I've done a lot of thinking. I've listened to you, I've listened to people like Libby Jones from Wrexham. I've done a lot of reading in producing that strategic plan. I just wanted to put it on the table now, but I want you to really have a very good look at it. And particularly that includes the council representatives as well, because it's about the relationship between us as a SACRE and the LEA, as well as the people who are actually responsible. We are not responsible for ORI in the county. All we're responsible for is actually advising. That responsibility lies with the LA. And it's important, therefore, that we have an effective relationship with them in terms of the work that we actually do on this committee. Otherwise, we're not making the most of our time. And I've seen Lowry's appeared. Hi, Lowry. I'm hoping, therefore, that there will be, as part of this process, an opportunity after we've had a look at it to actually go and have discussions with Lowry and Julie Fallon, who's in the cabinet, about how can we best proceed in looking at some of these items that we're suggesting and whether they could possibly become reality in taking our work forward. So it seems to me this is a good point now to actually take forward this, and I'm putting it on the table for folk to actually look at. Okay, is everyone happy with that? Right, okay, well, I'd like to suggest, therefore, that becomes a substantive item on our next agenda. All those in favour? Give me a seconder. Thanks, Mary. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Great. Okay. Item 7, the analysis of inspection reports. Phil, could you take us through that?
Yeah, I've included all of the inspections that were reported on and published in the period that we haven't met up till now, and they have made their way into the report. There are quite a number of schools. We don't normally report on this number of schools, but I think this time last year I'd reported on 1.5 years worth of inspection reports, and again that was quite long. I know that in Denbighshire they'd agreed that they wanted all of the year's inspection, the previous year's inspection reports, all presented at the same time rather than looking at them individually over the course of the 3 terms. And I've had a word with Roger, and that might be something that we as a Conwy SACRE want to adopt as well. Because as you'll see here, there's quite a substantial amount of information that's coming across from Estin, and it's easier to get a flavour of religious education within Conwy when you're looking at a larger selection of reports rather than just the 1 or 2 that have been published in the previous term. So 8 schools have been inspected and their reports have been published. And I'm not going to go through the report in any great detail because it's already been tabled, and you are obviously free to ask questions in a moment. But I will just say that Ysgol de Ganwy, for the first time in a long time, there has been a recommendation for religious education to be improved within that school. I have contacted that school already, and we had a Zoom meeting. No, it was a Teams meeting, a digital Teams meeting, and I had a discussion regarding their foundation phase and also their Key Stage 2. I don't feel that they're meeting the statutory time allocation in Key Stage 2, which I have mentioned, but in terms of meeting the flavour of the agreed syllabus, the three aspects, the three key skills, I do feel that they are very aware of what's expected of them. We discussed that although they're meeting once a fortnight for their religious education, they got 1 hour a fortnight, they can meet sort of on theme days and themed weeks to sort of either meet their statutory time, or they could move over to an hour a week. What I've said is that, so I've made my recommendations, and then I will revisit that in the summer, and hopefully I might be able to get into the school, but either way I'll be able to have a look at some books if they can get some work to me, and we can have a look at the quality of the religious education as a result of the recommendations. So that's it really, unless there are questions relating to the report that's been tabled. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, any thoughts on that? Hugh?
Can I say that this is a good step forward now? It's much more succinct than when we did it before. I'm going to turn to the Welsh language now. One question I have, maybe Phil can enlighten me here. Ydy estyn,
I'm a bit confused here of the definition of religious education. What is the terms do we use now? Because I've heard ethics and I've seen religion. Is Estyn going to use these new different terms when responding to reports? Because at the moment we have well-being, support and leadership, but there's not, they don't talk about ethics here. Is there a discussion as this happened? Because we have to work within the definition of religious education at the moment, but they don't follow these definitions. Do you understand the question?
Yeah. So before the summer, Welsh Government consulted on a name change for religious education, and it was decided that it will be religion, values and ethics. But that name will not be legal. It won't it won't be used until 2022 when the new curriculum comes online. So September 2022, religious education will become religious values and ethics. What I'm unsure of is this rollout. So there is a slight ambiguity in religious education that in Key Stage 4 for examination, it's called religious studies. So there's a religious studies Key Stage 4 exam, but the statutory duty in Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 3 is religious education, so RE, and then we're getting religious values and ethics, which will come on board in 2022. What I don't know is whether the Year 7 will have to attend an RVE class and the Year 8 will attend an RE class, or whether it will all become RVE right across the high school. I presume it will. I think schools will just adopt the name change and I will be an RVE teacher, not an RE teacher. But legally, I'm not sure how that would work, because in Year 8, they would still be the statutory duty on the teachers would be to provide the older curriculum. So they will have English, maths, science, RE, history, geography, but in year 7 they will have humanities. So the RVE fits in with the humanities and that particular way of working. So I'm not sure how it would work for year 8, year 9 statutorily, but I presume that most schools will just say, well, we've now got an RVE subject, department, whatever, rather than, well, they'll have a humanities, and so the RVE will be part of the humanities department. I hope that answers your question, Hugh.
Yes, thank you very much for that, because it does confuse some things, the words we use and such in the plan and such. So we need to be aware of that when we talk about the new curriculum. Thank you very much.
If I could just add there, SACRE is obviously Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education. Nothing's been said regarding, will it be a Standing Advisory Council for Religion, Values and Ethics, which would obviously change the name and the acronym for currently what we are sitting in. Yeah, so that I'm presuming that will be in discussions in the next few years as to what that and the impact the name change will have on lots of acronyms.
Okay, thanks for that, Phil. Any more thoughts on that? Just interesting, because we talked about making it part of our forward planning. The whole idea of actually taking the reports all as one and looking at a pattern right across them, which I think Hugh was just indicating was probably a good move. Would you all think that was a good move for next year? Yeah, lots of nods coming around there, so we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, if there's no more comments on that, no? Okay.
Can I ofyn, Roger, dan ni'n anfon?
I asked, do we send a letter this time to schools that we've seen the reports? And we need to think about sending a different letter to one school, which has been given that they need to develop by Estyn. I don't know what the opinion is on this.
Hugh, you might recall that Phil produced a template letter to go out from us with regard to schools. But I don't think, Phil, if I'm right, that we actually dealt with any negative feedback, did we? And I'm not going to call it negative, but the need for support, more support, I think, is what we're saying in relationship to the school.
Oh, there is what man ysgol yna sy'n
deud one school that has said that they're not following the curriculum, so we can't congratulate in the same way in a school like that to all the other schools. I don't want to name the school, but it's there.
Yeah, that's an issue that we might touch on a little bit later, actually. But can I therefore suggest that we write to the schools that Phil will actually put together, using the template, our usual letter of congratulations, and that if you'll delegate he and I to draft an appropriate letter to any other school that might not, we're not actually giving the complete and utter support to. Would that be appropriate, Phil?
Yeah. Chair, I'd like to propose Hugh's recommendation that individual schools that's been in question does get the similar letter, but also note our concern.
Yeah, it's a point taken. Phil?
And the school the school that had that as a recommendation has already contacted me and asked for support. So I think in this particular instance, it's not as if they haven't asked for support and they're not receiving support. They are receiving that support. So if we were to send a letter, which I think is right, saying that we are offering the local authority or the local authority are offering support or whatever that might sound like, that's already been taken up, and it might sound a little bit odd if they know they've already asked for that support. Now, if a school's not asked for support, then that letter would be different, I think, because it would be strongly recommending that the school gets in touch or that an advisor is therefore going to contact the school. I just think that at the moment, if we send out a letter to Ysgol de Ganwy, as highlighted in that particular report, they'll have said, well, that's great, we've already done that. So as long as the letter sort of reflects the current situation, saying things like, well, we know that you've already contacted and we hope that that will be sort of fruitful in moving the school forward in that recommendation, then obviously that's good. But using a blanket letter for that particular school in this particular situation might just seem that it's a little bit irrelevant or out of the time. So just making sure that the letters are relevant for the current situation in whatever the context is.
Yeah. Okay, so can we proceed on that basis then? Yeah. All those in favour? Okay, thanks. So that's down to you and me, Phil, to follow that one up. Okay, if we could move now to the draft annual report.
Roger, sorry, we've got the second part of the
sorry, yes, the
inspection.
Estin consultation. My apologies, Phil. Yeah. The Estin consultation, you might recall that we circulated to you your views on the Estin consultation as part of the Estin consultation. We didn't actually have any responses. To be fair, they gave us 4 weeks to turn around the whole thing. And we were also, Phil and I also were involved in 2 other major consultations you'd already delegated us to carry through. So we didn't actually make a submission as a result of that. However, the responses that are available from other educational professionals, SACREs and local authorities have been collated, and this document actually does share that. So if you could actually just perhaps take us through that briefly, Phil, that'd be great.
This is the only deliberate mistake of this particular autumn term SACRE minutes. You'll probably notice that the heading on the report that I sent out was for the consultation that's prior to the one that we were talking about. So unfortunately, that's my fault. What I will do is in the chat, there is the current response. So what I will do is I will just put, and I will email this out afterwards. Right, so the nuances, well, the first one, the one that I'd sent out as the response was looking at the consultation to what Estin should be doing currently. And that is they're visiting every school virtually at the moment. They're phoning every school for probably about a half-day's phone call to discuss things like the curriculum for Wales, the ALN, self-evaluation. They are focusing on well-being, and actually from the experience of the schools that I work with, they are very positive phone calls, and Estin are very concerned in a very positive way as to what is happening within the current system due to COVID. So that was the consultation evaluation that I accidentally sort of submitted. There is a different one, and I've just forwarded you the evaluation for that one. As I say, I will email it out, or ask Sally to email it out after this meeting. So the consultation that we didn't manage to submit a response to was regarding the new Estin inspection arrangements. They have asked whether there were three, so there were a few main areas. The first one was about the inspection areas that they currently inspect on. So we've just seen the headings: well-being, there's standards, there's leadership, teaching, care support and guidance. They are the 5 areas that are currently covered, and they asked the question, should they continue using those 5 areas? And overwhelmingly, each one of those 5 areas of the inspection framework were overwhelmingly positive in the responses that people gave to say that these need to continue. So I'll just remind you, the standards, well-being and attitudes to learning, teaching and learning experiences, care support and guidance, and leadership and management. So everybody that responded, or the majority, vast majority of people that responded, said that those 5 areas need to stay within the inspection framework. It's got a breakdown then of whether that was teachers, governors, education professionals, and why they agreed, and if they disagreed, why they disagreed as well. The second main area was the summative gradings. So at the moment they use excellent, good, adequate and unsatisfactory. We haven't really included those in our reports, but for those of you that work with schools and that have seen inspection reports, for each one of those areas, they will make a very distinctive judgment: excellent, good, adequate, and unsatisfactory. And then as a result of how those play out across the inspection, there will be some follow-up, possibly, if they're in the adequates or unsatisfactories. And what they said is they want to remove summative gradings in the inspection reports to make them a lot more less judgmental. And that goes back to our conversation about not using data when we are comparing schools. They don't want to use those summative grades for you to make arbitrary comparisons between schools. A bad inspection with unsatisfactory or adequates written all across the inspection will obviously have an impact on where parents wanting to send their schools, or whether they want to sort of change them mid-year. So it's quite detrimental. Rather than looking at the positive and moving the school forward, it can actually put schools in a worse situation if they're using summative gradings, or these are the reasons and the arguments that people put forward as to removing them. The majority of people, it was actually 50% strongly agree, with 30% agree. So again, overwhelmingly positive for the removal of those, but that report does highlight where people disagreed with that outcome, why they disagreed with that. And one of the reasons is said they said unsatisfactory and adequate provides clarity. You don't necessarily have to read the rest of the report, but you get a good idea from the headings as to where the school's at. That doesn't give you a good understanding of where the school's at and why they've come up with those judgments. But what some people were saying is they wanted to keep the judgments because it gives you a sort of almost like a headline, top line overview. But as I said, the majority of people wanted to remove that. The next question was to do with ESTIN review. So if schools are middling, they are not good and excellent, but they're not sort of unsatisfactory, but they've got a few adequates, then they would be, or they are currently put in what's called an ESTIN review. An ESTIN would visit them after 12 to 18 months. What they were suggesting is that they remove that as an option and they just sort of deal with schools that are unsatisfactory and in statutory categories. And actually, interestingly, 49%, so only 50% of the respondents said that that was a good idea. 32% said no, they wanted to carry on with the ESTIN review, and 19% in the middle said that they weren't sure. Interestingly, one of the reasons for the removal of the ESTIN review is that they can carry on and spend a lot of time focusing on schools that are unsatisfactory and leave schools that are in that middle section to the local authorities and to the consortia to support. But it will give them greater, not flexibility, but greater capacity to support those schools that need that support. But as I say, from the responses, it was very middle. The next section was about sixth forms in inspection reports, and they suggested that they, in a key stage, in a high school setting, that they separate sixth forms and write a specific section regarding sixth forms because they are different to key stage 3 and key stage 4. And again, overwhelmingly 63% said, yeah, that would be a positive move. Only 10% said that that wouldn't be a good idea, and 27% were in the middle, sort of unsure, they had no opinion. Again, if that was the case, if there are really strong key stage 3, key stage 4 practices, but not very strong key stage 5 practices, that could be highlighted in a report, and it means that schools could then direct their energies to improve specific areas that are needed. For those that people said that actually no, it doesn't matter, actually it was very reduced, but it was saying that actually you're inspecting the school as a whole, so why would you want to separate that out into separate? The final bit that was consulted on is removing, or currently ESTIN provide 15 working days notice for a school, and they wanted to reduce that down to 10 working days. 61% said agree or strongly agree, 31 respectively, and then it was sort of 8 not sure, 13% disagree, 18% strongly disagree. So again, overwhelmingly positive in the reducing the notice. Some people said that it should be moved to 5 days, and some said there should be no notice whatsoever. But as a whole, changing from 15 down to 10 days was quite a positive in terms of their feedback. I don't know where they've got to from this. It says the consultation will inform their inspection arrangements from 2021, and they'll be piloting the new inspection framework in the summer 2020, which is just gone, so I'm not sure. We will hold another consultation on inspection arrangements for further education, colleges, adult learning and work-based learning later on in the year. But obviously with COVID, that's obviously put everything back for their work schedules. So I presume that we'll be hearing a bit more about that at the end of this year. One thing I'm not sure about, and I don't know if any of the teacher colleagues or Dr. Lowry could help with this one, with the sabbatical year that Eston are currently on, but they are obviously meeting with schools, with that falling in the COVID year, will they extend their sabbatical, or are they looking just to jump straight back in September as if that sabbatical year has come to an end? I was going to say, Julia's all right.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to put my. I think they're jumping straight back in. I was on well, Lowry might know more than me, but I was on a call with them last week, and they have actually been going into some schools when the schools have invited them into school. Why they would do that, I don't know. But anyway, so they have been going into schools, and as it stands, they are jumping back in. But maybe Lowry knows more.
Yes, thank you, Julie, and thank you, Phil. I can come in there, and Julie's absolutely right. Surprisingly, they have been undertaking some thematic reviews in schools and local authorities. So just to give you a little bit of context, we have actually undergone a thematic review by Eston. We've had 2 formal days of interviewing, and they've been triangulating the information. So they've been contacting our schools. They've also sent a questionnaire out for parents to complete, and we will obtain feedback on the 11th of December. So I can bring that back to you for the next meeting as an update. We have strongly discouraged Eston from contacting schools over this pandemic. You know, we absolutely acknowledge that schools have had to be repurposed. They've been working exceptionally hard, 7 days a week, almost well over the core hours. So as a Chief Education Officer group, ADU, we've met with them a number of times. We've wrote to them collectively, and I wrote to them as well as lead here in Conwy, suggesting that it isn't the right time. Schools need to be focusing on getting through the pandemic, keeping learners in the workforce safe. They have recognised it, and they have tapered down the type of visits that they have been undertaking in schools. However, they have been holding telephone conversations, and you know, some of the line of inquiry has actually been quite invasive, and also on subject areas that they didn't give us any forewarning on. So they are going to be jumping straight back in. I think we're going to still be meeting with them and lobbying for them to re-look at the way they're contacting school, because you know we don't know when the end of this is it after Christmas, is it within 3 months? You know, it's dependent on many variables, the vaccine being one of them. So I think I'm quite disappointed with their response. I'm quite disappointed in the way they have contacted our schools, and we have tried to give our schools as much warning as possible. But I can keep you updated at this SACRE meeting, and I'm sure, you know, Julia and Colette as well will have information along the way. But they are continuing with their regulatory function as they intended.
That's really helpful, Larry. Because we weren't initially going to be discussing this, so it's been, get this feedback has been very useful. Julia?
I've had my phone call, and I think Lowry's right. I think it does depend on which inspector rings you up, really. So I think some have been quite intrusive and others have been quite supportive. I was really lucky. The lady that I had an inspector ring me, and she was really talking about blended learning and how we're helping the children catch up, and how we're delivering work at home for children if a class is self-isolating, and how we've been adapting the curriculum with the new situation we find ourselves in. So I think probably every head has had a slightly different experience, as is always the case with Estin, depending on the person that rings you or the team that comes into your school and what they're interested in. So yeah, I think you know, again, it's just a mixed response. They didn't go into they didn't talk about RE, or they didn't talk about anything really other than well-being, staff well-being, pupil well-being. So yeah, but mine was quite a positive experience, but I know others that haven't had that. So
okay, thanks for that, Julie.
Sorry, Roger, would it help if, just for reference, that I sent Sally, for the purposes of the minutes, the letter that I wrote on behalf of Conwy to them?
Yes, I think that really would, because it tells us about the relationship that's actually happening between the LEA and Estin on this one, and how supportive you are, obviously, being of the role of teachers in these difficult times, and that'll be really good. Yeah. Yes, please. We all agreed on that? We all like a copy of that? Yeah, great. Thanks, Larry. Phil, that was something that I tried to pick up mine on the right-hand screen when you said it down. But how do you want to deal, therefore, with the responses to the 2021 consultation that we originally tabled? The transition.
The transition. The reports. They're obviously very much in that at the moment. So the consultation evaluation that I'd sent out was outlining how are they going to be working in the current period, and then the consultation that I failed to attach was to do with what we've been talking about now, and that's going to be the inspection framework moving from 2021 onwards. It's interesting, I don't know if they are going to carry on with the new inspection framework in 2021. They'll obviously have to start piloting that relatively soon. They said they would start in September, in the summer 2020, but they did stop all inspection activities in the summer, and then they've restarted with the result of this consultation that I'd put in the minutes. But they are looking to obviously establish a new inspection framework. So yeah, watch this space regarding the new inspection framework.
Right, okay. I mean, I did notice actually in reading the responses on the consultation in relationship to the transition, that over and over again, the word strongly was used several times, the importance of collaborative working between schools and that networking of mutual support. And you know, something we've noted actually in our strategic planning, the importance of, and of course we've lost the lead practitioner scheme in relationship to that in our local LA. So that really jumped out to me about how valuable they felt that work was, and I'm sure your colleagues, Julie, will think that, wouldn't they?
yeah, I think we're trying to work now, you know, as schools, as learning organisations, we're trying to work as clusters now. So we're supporting each other on a cluster basis. So I'm in Abergele, so we're with Ysgol Emrys ap Iwan. And we're also an MPEP school for Welsh Government. So we look at research as well. So we are, you know, we're creating our own networks as well. But obviously within any network, there are specialisms, aren't there? And so I suppose that's something that moving forward we'll have to look at. I suppose if one cluster in Conwy is particularly good at one thing, then they could support another cluster, couldn't they? And I think that's how moving forward we've got to support each other.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Any more thoughts on those Estyn consultations before we move on?
Can I sôn am un peth? Mae yna gymaint o sôn rwan am weithio ar draws ffinia mewn clystyra.
There's talk about working across boundaries in these strategies. There's a talk about a thematic research. I've remembered looking at this before, and there's a positive reaction to this. I'm glad Phil that talked about this, but maybe Estyn should look more at some systematic themes on local areas as they've done before, because the individual reports on schools aren't very useful every time, not for the local authority either. So how does an area and a cluster work together, and how we work together? And when the authority has a report, does SACRE work come into this? Because there are many good practices that we can learn from. So from my experience before, the thematic reports are more useful than individual reports on schools.
I think the point that you're trying to make there, Hugh, is about patterns, aren't you? And analysing it and looking at the patterns and so forth.
Yeah.
I don't think that was necessarily a massively popular view in the consultation, but although I personally think it's of enormous value. Phil, would you like to just comment on that with some guidance?
Dr. Larry Brown's hands up as well. I don't know if Larry, you want to say anything?
Yes, just quickly, I think that the points that he was making are valid, and I know Hugh and I have discussed these over the years and our concerns. I think what we need to do as local authorities is we need to educate Estyn, and we need to work with them in the way that we are operating. So, for example, they, during our thematic review, asked very prescriptive sets of questions, specific lines of inquiry, which didn't quite fit with the way in which we are currently working. You know, our schools in Conwy, as Julia refers to now, do work as strongly as clusters. They're forming alliances now across a range of schools. So as part of the blended learning model, that they can tap into some of the strengths in a particular school and distribute those skills across the alliance of the cluster. So that's the slant we took with Estyn. Rather than them asking questions, we just wanted to relay to them what we're actually doing. So I think it's about trying to re-educate them as a body, because they are very rigid, dare I say it, in the way that they operate, and it's very difficult to sort of veer them away from that.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a really positive, I mean, that's really encouraging to hear that, Larry, in relationships to Conwy as well, because it's clearly enormously valued from what Julia's already saying. And it's an eminently sensible way forward, particularly when you have different strengths in different schools, you know, and that can then be sort of rolled onto other schools through the sharing process and so forth. And that's really, really good to hear that. Bill?
It's mentioned in the evaluation in the report that I'm talking about now that I'll read you this sentence. It says, a key message from education professionals was the need to ensure consistency amongst inspectors, suggesting that having the same lead inspector inspecting a cluster of schools could help with this. I'm just thinking of what Julia said regarding that consistency across HMI itself, but if they were to inspect a cluster, then they would get a good flavour of what the cluster is good at, rather than just sort of thinking that it's hearsay, oh, they're benefiting from another school, but I'm not actually going to see that in practice. Whereas actually, if they were to inspect a cluster, like Hugh said, they would be able to bring up patterns and themes that are genuine within the schools that are working together, rather than it sort of just being an arbitrary, oh yes, we're working with another school, oh that's fine, but I'm going to look at your particular context. So that is positive. Whether it'll happen or not, who knows? But if the system's pushing you that way, you never know, it might have an impact on the way that Estyn inspect.
Well, given the implementation of the kind of structures that Larry's actually been sharing, that's obviously the most sensible way forward. Any indications, Larry, as whether that will be the case?
Well, I shall tell you after December the 11th when they feed back, which is next week. So that our Christmas is dependent on what we. No, I'm saying that glibly. What they plan to do is feed back to local authorities next week, and then they will be publishing a report with recommendations around the 15th of January.
Right. Okay.
So hopefully, they'll shed some light on the proposed future.
Sorry, you froze then, but I think I got the gist of that. And maybe we could actually.
Yes, it's mid-January.
Yeah, and we could put that feedback from us on the next meeting and catch up on that one. It'd be good. Right. Okay. Well, that was really helpful. It certainly raised my awareness of what's going on. And it also points out the value of having someone like yourself, Larry, at these meetings, because it really kind of widens our understanding of the context that we're actually working in. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Any other thoughts on Estin? Right, okay. Well, we can move on to the draft annual report. You did ask us to actually think about, to visit about how we actually proceeded with this in terms of the way it was drafted and the kind of information that we actually included in it. That was quite short notice, but Phil and I, you'll probably notice that based on the preceding year, that we have actually made a number of changes. I've actually highlighted in my introduction a lot of the problems that I felt in the context that we're actually working in at the particular moment. And I don't particularly want to go over those now because they filtered their way into our strategic planning, and therefore they will automatically come up when we actually have that meeting. Phil, do you want to add anything to what I've just said and then give people a chance just to ask questions?
Yeah, so the annual report for last year, sorry that we updated it. Roger and I had been through it and considerably added to it, but I didn't update my link to Sally. So I apologize, Sally, you still had the old one, but then you had the new one as well. So anyway, it's all worked out. The report, we wanted it to be more informative for those that would receive the report. So it wouldn't be just a dry, this is what we discussed, but it actually could be used as a document that could flag up support and resources and good quality religious education. Because we thought it's a freely available document once it's published. It's available on the SACRE website for anybody to see. And if we could create something that highlights positive and good quality resources and good quality information regarding religious education, that it might be something that schools would use. And also it would be a way of informing the local faith communities and also counsellors as to the work of religious education and where they can find out extra information. So it will, hopefully by comparing the two, you can probably see how it changed. So Roger's written quite a comprehensive forward for the annual report, but actually a lot of that's covered then, as he's already mentioned, in an action plan going over the next few years. So the issues that have been brought up in there will actually be addressed in the way that SACRE wants to move forward and work in the future. And then also I've included, so rather than just saying, yeah, we're still using the agreed syllabus, actually there are clear links to the agreed syllabus. So anybody that wants to see that can click on those and download them and see them in the flesh. So, and the same with the Estin reports. All of the material that has been discussed, we've tried to make available just by clicking on the electronic version of the report. Anything that we've mentioned regarding the RE quality mark, and in the future things like the Farmington Fellowship and other suitable third-party organisations that will support religious education in Wales, we want to make reference to that as well, so schools will be able to come to this and access it in the future. So I don't want to mention much more other than the previous parts and what you would expect from the annual report are there, but if you've been in SACRE for any great length of time, you'll also see that there are images in there as well, and the front pages of various documentation that's relevant. So I feel it's a far more useful document, and that's what Roger wanted. It's a far more useful document for the various stakeholders that we are supporting for SACRE. If there are any questions, just a reminder, this is the first ever SACRE meeting I did for Conwy. My predecessor was at the meeting as well, and I just remember him saying it's generally from business that was discussed in the previous year. So we're not discussing the business, if you like, we're just looking at, well, actually, did we discuss it, and is it accurate? So it's not really oh, this is an interesting discussion, let's go down that rabbit hole. It's more to sort of did we discuss that, and do you like the changes, and do you think we should continue with those changes in annual reports moving forward? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. That's helpful. Any thoughts?
Gai nodi fel
Can I just note, as you know, Roger, I've been pushing for something more stable and strategic like this. And I think this is a more honest report. It's open, and I think it's a positive development and on the way forward. So I thank you both for your work with Phil to make this report. Thank you very much.
That's really appreciated, Hugh. It was a good few hours went in talking. It's really good that Phil and I actually have such an ongoing positive relationship that we can pick up a phone at any time, it works really well between us. And I really appreciate the support that Phil's been giving me. But also, as you notice as well, I've spoken to Libby Jones in Wrexham as well on a number of occasions in regard to some of the issues, and her support has also been very much appreciated. I think one thing we haven't mentioned on this, though, and Sally, perhaps you can help us on this one. Do we have a defined circulation at the moment for the report? It's all right writing it, but it's got to be read, hasn't it? So do we have a defined circulation?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Right, okay. Well, perhaps we could have some thoughts on that and create one. It would seem obvious to me that they go out to schools and to heads of ORE, and I'll take feedback from you as well. I also know that I personally, because I serve on Catene, my local Catene, I made a presentation to the local Catene, which it goes right across the spectrum in Llandudno, from Roman Catholic right through to independence. And that was much appreciated. As a result of that, they have already asked if, as a matter of course, they can actually have a copy of the annual report. And I know that although I'm from an Anglican background, I attend a United Reformed Presbyterian-based church, and the presbyters actually asked me also to send a copy back to them. So any thoughts on creating this circulation list and how best to make the report most effective within schools? Any feedback?
We do have, as representative, responsibilities to answer back to our nominations. So that's what I do, typing a report from this meeting and putting it up as a copy for everyone to see. So it's a responsibility for us to share this information as far as we can, I think, but there's a strategic purpose for this as well. As far as education goes, is this being part of the education authorities' documents and so forth anyway?
Well, you raise a really important point there, actually, Hugh, because, as I said earlier, the responsibility for ORE within the curriculum is not ours, it's the LA's. And in fact, Chris, this is the only area of the curriculum that the authority is actually directly responsible for, the only area. And therefore, I think that the fact that the councillors, they need to be aware of this, and I think Cabinet needs to be aware of it as well, because they make the financial decisions as well. That would be my own view in terms of the politics of it. I wonder whether you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, Councillor Cater has his hand up.
Sorry.
I'll wait for Lowry.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. Yes, Roger, and I agree, and I just want to echo as well the thanks for the report and also the links. We can take this through our political channels, through the Education and Skills Scrutiny Committee, so that we can raise awareness of it. I'm sure Councillor Cater and Councillor Khan can provide further information of that. So I'm happy to work with Phil and put that on our forward work plan this year so that we can take it through those avenues.
That'd be really, really helpful, Laura. Thank you indeed for that. Can we just make a note of that, Sally, as well? In relationship to the, would you advise us to send out a copy to, as I suggested, Julia, to all schools, all heads of ORA, both sectors?
Yeah, I think heads would welcome it, and the heads will glance at it, some of them, and then they'll hand it on to whoever is looking, in charge of RE. But they will definitely see it then, won't they? So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I think if it does come through the political channel, that's a public document then, so we can we can do that in both ways.
Yeah, Larry, on that particular point, you have an education newsletter, don't you, that goes out?
Yes, we did, but we halted it during the pandemic because we were because we send out now fortnightly briefing documents, because we were aware we don't want to overwhelm schools with copious amounts of information. So we've actually put that on hold at the moment in terms of a generic newsletter, but we do have a format by which we send out general non-COVID related information. So it could be something that we can do that way. Julia, I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, because you mentioned that, didn't you, in our last briefing?
Yeah.
That we'd have a separate document, so I think that would sit very well within there.
Yeah, I'd like to tally it though, Roger, with taking it to Cabinet. Well, sorry, not Cabinet, to Education and Skills, because I think Councillor Cater and Councillor Khan, I think it's important as well that elected members that sit on governing bodies hear it through that arena also. So if we could do it simultaneously to that.
Yeah, councillors, that's a really important suggestion. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I entirely agree with that, because before you mentioned all that, Lowry, I was thinking about the more generic county council member briefing that we've got, whether it could go into that. And the other thing is, Roger, a lot of town and community councillors are school governors, and I think would be interested in this. And I was just wondering whether the report could go out to the town and community council clerks for distribution, or at least availability to the various town and community councillors.
Yeah.
As I say, a lot of them are school governors and very involved in their schools, chairman of the school governors and so on. So I was just wondering about that level as well.
Chris, could I just come across you at that point, if that's all right? The specific target audience, in my view, is extremely important, because governors obviously oversee the delivery of the curriculum within their own schools. So it's governors. I mean, Larry, would it be possible just to actually have it sent out to governors? Is there an instrument you could deliver that?
Well, we're very lucky actually, because Mr. Hugh Roberts is the chair of our Conwy Governors Association meeting. So prior to the pandemic, Hugh and I worked on that forward work plan and that agenda for that meeting. So Hugh, I wonder whether this is something that we consider circulating amongst the association members also.
Yeah, I was going to come to that and respond saying that, first of all, RE is on the next, should be on the next meeting that we have possibly of Conwy governors as well. And we could also send it out, as Laurie has said, through our mechanism at the moment.
Okay, how does that get action? Does Sally just get the appropriate list and?
Well, Sally can liaise with Sally. You can liaise with Nia, my Nia, on this, and we can get that circulated. I think what you probably need to consider agreeing on is what you're actually going to decide collectively from this meeting. Do you just want it distributed amongst the key stakeholder groups, or do you want it taken as an update to Education and Skills Committee? If you choose the latter, there'll be a delay really in getting it out, because of course we have to go through those democratic processes. So do you want it just sent out to head teachers, governors, the stakeholders, the regional consortia? Phil?
Does one stop the other? So if it goes through the legal process or goes down to Cabinet or to Education, would that stop it being sent out until it's been agreed or discussed? Or could it go out to schools and then go to Education and just sort of ride the time, but knowing that it's already been sent out?
No, we can send it out to schools. If that's an agreement from this meeting, we can send it out. I think maybe we identify who the groups that you want it circulated to are.
Yeah, because we're only an advisory body.
Yeah,
it's an advisory document, so it doesn't necessarily have to be affirmed. Abdul.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. When is Phil's going to send the letters to all the schools? Maybe it would be a good idea to send that with the letter as well.
That's only to a limited audience. We'll do that anyway, I think.
Yeah, as well as.
Abdul. Yeah, but this will go out en masse as a posting, I would think, anyway. Although I would like to take your advice, Larry, if everybody else agrees there, that we just get this out to the distribution network we've already shared in this meeting, if that's okay.
how about that Phil and I meet, and then should we do that, Phil, and then we can firm up those circulation lists? I'll arrange for that.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Larry. That's really helpful.
Could we note in some sort of letter here, you know, for the attention of, because there is a danger in the schools, the way they are things at the moment, you know, that heads can't deal with everything, and they shouldn't be dealing with everything either, because there are other people in the schools. When we send something out, they're not aware of these things. So in secondary schools, for instance, you would have the RE head of department. You'd also have governors who are matched to departments in schools as well. So we've got, okay, forgetting councillors now, there are, you know, in the trenches there are people who are working with these things and know about them, and they should know that they are going down to that level of work in the county. So maybe heads of governors should be responsible for, or heads responsible for sharing to those people. And we've got a number of people there who are day to day working with this. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I think, Hugh, you're sharing that when this goes out, that maybe there's a very short letter that goes with it, suggesting what the distribution within the school would be, obviously to the subject governor, the head of department and so forth. And I know as a head, I mean, the stuff that comes in it as a secondary head is just enormous, and you're just sifting it. And if you've actually got precise advice where this can be best used, that's really helpful, and it can go down those channels. Yeah. So we could do that, Phil. That would be good. Yeah. Great. Thanks. That's really helpful. Can we move on now?
Chair, are we needing
we need to adopt it, don't we?
We're approving it. Yes, we'll need an
we
official vote on that. Yeah.
Okay. If there are any further, oh no, sorry, one thing. Apologies. We haven't had a diocesan feedback at all on this document, either in relationship to circulation or its value, and certainly I would appreciate that. So have either of you got any comments on that at all? Jenny?
Yeah, sorry, I did put something in the chat. Yeah, it's a really good document, and particularly with the links. I was just, I mean, obviously for our non-church schools, for the mission area leaders, to have sight of this document would be great. But I mean, there's such good information in it. I'm wondering if there is a way that would you have a forum, a virtual platform that you had it on that we could highlight it to with different people?
Phil, on that?
So currently I've got a Google Drive and I put a lot of things on that, and then I can send out the links. So the agreed syllabus is sitting on a Google Drive. I could do with having a chat with somebody in the local authority. We obviously have a website, and a lot of you'll have got the agenda from the website. I don't think it would be too difficult to have a link in a committee's page for the SACRE, but obviously I need to have a chat with somebody in the local authority to look at what that might look like and whether we would have our own page. And then those can be held centrally in a Conwy IT department, and then those links can be sent out freely, available from the SACRE portal, whatever you want to call it, that we've accessed the agendas from. Would that be all right, Lowry?
Yes, absolutely, Jenny. I think that's again a really good point. We've been working on this over time. So we've got the Hub platform, whereby we upload all relevant documentation, and governors also have access to that. So anybody who's got a Hub username and a Hub ID can access that, and it's indexed, and there are secure areas of it. So we could utilize that, and we encourage schools, governors and local authority officers to utilise that as an information source. So yeah, we can do that.
Will, my only concern with is the Hub access. The Hub logon is available for governors, and I'm presuming that all the councillors here would have access to that.
Yes,
but the faith representatives might not have access to that, and that's the only issue with some of the stuff that I've put in the annual report, is that I know that it's only teachers and governors that would be able to access that.
Well, if that is a need that we identify, we can obtain access for them with our licence, Phil.
Oh,
so I don't
brilliant.
see that is an issue, because if these are deemed to be stakeholders that we wish to share information with, then we can provide them with that information. I mean, I'm not a whiz on this. I've got, we've got an officer that does this, but I think, Phil, if we meet, we can set that up.
Okay,
yeah, again, really helpful. Thank you very much for that.
I think sorry, Roger, we're going to need a mechanism then for so people who have got a Hub account, they need to make sure that that Hub account is live and they know how to access that, and there might need to be some training around that for those that have got one but have not used it. And then also those that haven't got one and they know they haven't got one, they need to sort of flag up to the committee to say, I don't know if Colette, have you got one? You would have had one through school, but probably not working for the CES. So actually you would need to flag up to SACRE that you would like a Hub, and so then we can then act on that, or whoever in the local authority can act on that.
Colette?
Can I just ask how much of a public document this actually is? Because when you were talking, and by the way, thank you so much, there's obviously a lot of hard work gone into that, and very much appreciated. In my mind, I was envisaging, we have a diocesan website and we're in the process of building a very strong education part of that website. Now I envisage being able to put that report on the website. We've already got a heading for SACRE, and obviously we've got all the authority SACREs feeding into that website. And I'd envisage putting that report on there. Would that be possible? As you say, talking about Hub would make that a little, obviously quite difficult for, say, even some of our priests, some of our people who may be out of the school sphere, but who are still very interested to know what is happening with SACREs.
don't see any problem, Phil, with that here.
No, I mean, historically, we've hosted them on the SACRE website. And then what I would do is I would open it up on the SACRE website, copy the URL at the top, and then I would send that to whoever and anybody. So, and if it's available there, then there's no reason why somebody wouldn't download it and then maybe either host the link or host the actual document on the Catholic sort of education website or the Church in Wales website. So it could be as much as a link to, and I think this is where Hub might be quite restrictive. So if we make sure that it's available on the SACRE website for anybody, if you like, but then the church or the Catholic Church might want to download that and then upload it to their own area, or they might just take the URL link from SACRE and then feed that into their sort of members. Yeah.
Jenny, Annes, would you think of doing something similar?
Yeah. That would be easy for us because we've got several SACREs and we want to coordinate that. So it would be and be able to have easy access within the diocese.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Annes? Can you hear me? I think she's frozen. Right. Jenny, while we're doing that, could you possibly come in there?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just exactly as Annes just said, it would, yeah, if it was on the SACRE, right?
Yes, can you?
We could all dance to this.
Yeah, sounds like very angelic. Yeah, great, Phil. I mean, even just out the link.
Annes, if you can hear me, we're not hearing you at all. You're just coming through as a broken tune almost. No, she's gone. Oh, sorry, back to you, Jenny, then. Yeah,
just as Annes was saying, yeah, if it could go on the SACRE out from there, then we could copy that link. Because I was thinking, Phil, I don't know, it's just such interesting information in there that you've collated together.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes. Sorry, Annes, I'll be quiet. She's muted.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry, it's I live in Anglesey and our Wi-Fi signal's not the best, so apologies for that. What I was saying basically was that I think we could act as a platform, and having the link to the SACRE would be better because we could then have it on, host it on our website and share the information that way. That would allow easier access than Hub.
Right, okay. Well, Phil, on the basis of the feedback we've just actually had, can I leave you to link with people in terms of how best to distribute, therefore, on that basis? And we've already got a mechanism. You can meet with Lowry to do it through the education part, you know, the LA. And I think that way we're going to get very, very hopefully productive, you know, circulation of this particular document. It's going to get more used. And I'm particularly keen, as Hugh said, that governors, it gets down to governor level as well, because they are directly responsible for the curriculum in their schools. Okay, any more thoughts on that before we move on?
And I just note, I want to note something else, Roger. The translation, the translation of the last part of the document. It is the last part. No, on page 48. Darpariaeth hyfforddiant gychwynnol athrawon, the teacher education. The translation there is not quite right.
Right. Okay. Well, you're obviously not talking to an expert issue. Sorry. Could you possibly liaise with Sally with regard to that?
Well, I'll just point it out to you now. It says that roedd darlithydd addysg ag arweinydd olrediedig ar gyfer ysgol addysg a datblygiad dynol yn fod I ddarparu.
Was meant to.
Was supposed to, which doesn't quite strike it as we had arranged to or something there instead, to make it look that it's no you know, weakness on anybody's part. It sounds wrong somehow in Welsh, as though they were supposed to, but they didn't do it.
Right.
Do you understand? So,
Yeah.
so somebody could look at that. We got a translator here anyway, so the translator can advise us.
Could we do that, Sally?
Yeah, that's fine, no problem.
Yeah, and then we can just put that small amendment before it does get through the circulation process, yeah?
Yeah, okay.
Brill, thanks a lot. Okay. Well, we talked a lot about newsletters already. Oh, what? No, we've not. Sorry, Sally, we've still not approved it, have we?
No, we need a proposer and a seconder, and then we will need a vote from each separate committee, but a show of hands is fine.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So need a proposer.
Jenny.
Jenny, thank you, Jenny. Seconder. Thank you. Okay. I'll take the faith representatives first, please. Can we have a vote? Yeah, all in favour, unanimous. Okay. The councillors? Okay, all in favour. And the professional reps? Thanks, Julia. Okay, unanimous. Okay, well, thank you very, very much. And I'm particularly thankful as well for I think that's been a really helpful discussion on circulation, which could be, help to make our work that much more effective. So that's appreciated. Well, we talked a lot about newsletters. We did raise the whole idea last time. Lowry, this was through whoever was sitting in as your officer, who's moved on to Anglesey, I forget his name now. But any newsletter that we produce, in fact, for practicing professionals in the field through SACRE, would in fact be linked with the LA newsletter when it eventually goes out. I know you've just said that's temporarily suspended. I'm just talking about that, therefore, in principle. But Phil, you've led on, disappeared. Oh, there you are. Phil, you've led on this, and I personally think it's a really, really useful. It's succinct, it's to the point, it provides access points to support for teachers, etc. And I really do like it. This is your baby, so could you just take us through it?
Yeah, so we proposed in the autumn that we write a newsletter for schools. I wrote one then and submitted it. We were going to agree with it or agree it in the spring term, but we weren't able to meet. So although it's written, or it was written in the spring, and that's what it says, issue spring 2020, we can change that to the autumn 2020 and send that out. I think it's very relevant. They're rather than some of the things being in past tense, they're currently in present tense, but that might need to change. But I think if you're happy with that, we can send that out to schools. It fits in with the action plan that Roger will be discussing in the next, hopefully in the spring, in that it will flag up training, resources, current bits of information regarding curriculum for Wales and the reform, etc. So it does quite a lot of things, if you like, and it's quite informative. We're using it across Denbighshire and Conwy. As I said, we've got interest from other authorities. And I think it was mentioned that it could be used in some of her other SACREs, but obviously I'll investigate that. That won't hinder what we will do and whether we will send that out. So if SACRE is happy, I will send this out and arrange to send this out. I will if I meet with Dr. Lowry Brown regarding all of the other things that we're talking about, we can work out the distribution for that within Conwy.
Okay. Further to our earlier discussion, Bill, would there be any value in just putting a small thing about the annual report from SACRE, which is trying to be supportive of our professionals in the field? Would you have a view on that?
Yeah, I've squeezed and squeezed and squeezed to get it onto the 2 pages. That's my only issue, is that I don't want something that's 3, 4, 5 pages long. So that's the only issue. I mean, what we could do is if I could find, and again, with it being it would have to be a very Conwy specific, and then Denbighshire would have something similar, I think.
Yeah.
Just looking at the space that there isn't available, yeah, I'm happy to have a go at doing that. We can have a look at where that might go.
We won't make it mandatory then, just say if possible, if you could proceed. Yeah, that'd be good. Right. Any thoughts on the newsletter? Any comment, feedback? Lots of nods, feeling that it's a good thing to be doing. Well, can I just, on behalf of you all, express my appreciation to Phil for producing this. And it's obviously building on his previous network within the authority. And although he's not our advisor, having been our advisor, he comes with real positives in this respect. So I think we're all saying big vote of thanks. Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Okay. SACRE questionnaire. About how to manage that. This was an idea that emerged from SACRE, that we should actually go out with a questionnaire to schools. You've got a copy, you'll find a copy of that on page 55 of your. We'll try to keep it to a small number of questions. There are 5 in total. And I mean, I'd like a discussion really about you know, how we manage this effectively. I note that, you know, that on a lot of questionnaires, that sometimes we only get maybe 1/3 of schools, but Phil and I talked about that, and we do feel that as long as it produces a point made by you earlier, a pattern that we can actually see, it will be a very useful document to actually have when it's the feedback is actually summarized. And also a relationship, Lowry, oh, she's gone, as to how we best knit this in with what the LEA themselves are actually doing. So any thoughts on how we manage this?
Just a thought before you start discussing the questions and how it might go out. It just dawned on me that the annual report, the newsletter, and this would be quite a nice package to go out to schools, because if the annual report goes out, it obviously drives some questions, and then schools starting to think about their own religious education, and then also thinking about the issues within the newsletter. It does seem to be quite a nice package that a coordinator might want to receive and to go through if they're focusing on their subject. And I don't know whether that wants to be part of the discussion in how it goes out, and whether, I don't know how it would go, but if it was to link and go in with the same letter that talks about the annual report, it could also then talk about, you've had the annual report, thank you very much, any comments would be kindly received. Oh, by the way, there's a questionnaire to support SACRE and their work in the future. Yeah. I don't know whether that would drive a little bit of encouragement for schools.
Well, Julia, on that one in particular. Yeah, you're muted. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I agree with Phil.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. We're beginning to get a really holistic sense of what we're trying to do here, which would be really good. Everybody else agree? Yeah, lots of nods everywhere. Phil, if you could negotiate that, therefore, with Lowry. Oh, Larry's back. Yeah. The question. Thanks, Lowry. Yeah, because I was going to ask you a question about whether you were going to would help us to push this particular item, but clearly you are. So that'd be really helpful. Yeah. What about the appropriateness? I mean, we try to keep it simple. Just like some feedback, possibly. Do you feel the questions are appropriate? Because they're the key to obviously to the whole process. Without going through them all individually, which will take a long time, but. You know, is there anything which you feel is not appropriate, or is there anything that we might actually have missed that would be useful to have feedback on?
Gai nodi yma, da ni isio ryw le.
And I note, do we need to put a little space on the bottom for anyone to give any comments or something? Because I know we're trying to go on the positives on this and concentrate on those, but the overall picture wouldn't be help for us as SACRE. So I don't know if you want to give any space for someone to give their concerns at the moment, although I don't want to take any space from the Education Authority either. But we should have some feedback space so we can ask them about their main concerns about ARI at the moment or something like that, or any other matters. Would you like, which would you like to tell us about? So I know people like Julia want to have some feedback and would put all the positive things instead of space for any matters that we have at the moment. That would be some help for us as a strategy, I think.
Yeah. I think having an old person in my own response to that, and I'll take it from the rest of you as well, would be, I think it would, although it wouldn't give us patterns, it would, by having an open-ended question, it would give an opportunity for the people on the receiving end of the questionnaire, that they are genuinely being listened to. You know, that it's not just asking us to give them specific, it's asking them to take a broad view. And particularly in their own individual context, I think that would be a very valuable thing to do, maybe just an open-ended question at the end. Julia, sorry.
And also it would need some sort of introduction, you know, because it's got CASAG or whatever on the top. Well, a teacher's going to ask, well, who are these people to ask me these questions?
Yeah, well, if it goes out as part of the pack, though, that will be automatically in place, I think. Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, I just thought that would be nice if there was an opening paragraph written by the chair to bring it all together. I think that would be quite nice. Okay,
so if you and I could liaise on that after this meeting, before the stuff goes to the LA and you have your meeting with Larry. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would be good. Are you happy, Larry? I want to make sure, we're talking about partnership all the time in that strategy. Are you happy with this?
Yes, I am. And many of the items that I've just noted now, Phil and I can work through over the next few weeks now before Christmas. And I think we can tick a lot of these off before we come to SACRE again, Phil.
Great, great. Okay, thanks. All right, any other thoughts on that? We'll certainly, there's an amendment suggested. Can we just all agree? I'd like to, I can't propose this. Someone like to propose that we amend this. Colette, seconded by Mary. Okay, thanks. All in, yeah, I've got to do the voting, haven't I? Okay, Faith? Unanimous. Council? Yeah, Abdul's not around. Okay. Right, professionals. Yeah, okay, we'll do that.
As faith, hope, and charities. Just councils and schools.
Yeah, we've never done this before, Julia. It was only in the briefing for this meeting with Sally that I realised, I don't know whether Hugh, as previous chair, you realised that any voting you actually had to have in these kind of clusters. And if you recall, we come back to it, but when we're talking about the membership of those clusters, at the last meeting, we were encouraged not to extend our membership because it would outweigh the balance in the clusters. Yeah. Well, that doesn't make any difference. It's by majority, you can have as many members as you want, effectively, as long as you only have the one vote in unanimity. So, yeah, so it's a new experience, faith, yes. Hope and charity. Okay, we can move on. Right, item 11, the curriculum for Wales. I'm getting an update here. Over to you, Phil.
So we included the responses for both of the consultations in the minutes, and you'll notice that in the new annual report, in the most recent annual report, they are we've put them as appendices at the end of the annual report. There's nothing really to say other than we we went through the questions. The first one is about the name change to religion, values and ethics, and obviously that then we reported that in the newsletter that Welsh Government had decided. Very unexpectedly, I've got to say, that RVE was going to be the name. We honestly thought it was going to be Worldviews, but overwhelmingly in their evaluation, they just said more people voted for RVE than they did for Worldviews, and that's the one they're going to go for. So it was a very democratic process, and the name change as a result. They are going to go through.
Oh, sorry to cut across you there.
Am I saying the right bit?
Well, yeah, that was the bit I was going to do. It doesn't matter.
Well, that became first, so I thought you were just deferring it across to me, giving me both bits.
But the feedback you shared with me was, in fact, that religion and worldviews was the majority view.
No, sorry, for the right of withdrawal, they said that actually they wanted to keep it, but Welsh Government in its wisdom feels that it wants to continue to remove the right of withdrawal. But the name change was a very democratic process, which is the reason that they'd chosen it, because actually more people had voted for religion, values and ethics than they had done for worldviews.
Oh, right, okay. Well, as you might remember, we've actually voted for religion and worldviews, but I did actually write on an individual basis to the LEA with regards to the dangers of that, because in terms of worldviews, not to the LEA, sorry, and to the government on that was part of the consultation. And the danger with worldviews, of course, is that you bring in things like communism, capitalism, and all sorts of other things. And that was a road that they probably wouldn't go down. So I did my own feedback on that. However, I do get a little bit worried, not so much in Wales, but in North Wales, but certainly in South Wales, in terms of ethics. Our view of ethics, certainly in terms of faith, is determined very differently. So you might have very, very different ethical contexts. And I just hope, therefore, that will become an opportunity to explore those, as opposed to actually just presuming that ethics was something that we all agreed on. Certainly in a Western European context, if you read books like the Tom Holland reviewed Dominion recently, our ethics have developed from a Christian context, as we know, that will be quite different sort of basis, maybe in an Islamic context as well. So anyway, that was just a qualifier on me. We're obviously going to go with OVE anyway. So that's the feedback. You've seen a copy of the feedback we actually gave. That was extensively circulated at the time. So, is there any additional comments before we move on? No. Okay.
Can I bring one thing to attention? The title of this document is the full curriculum, isn't it? And we must be always aware that the religious education is a statutory part on its own, rather than the full curriculum. So it depends what comes into the statutory part regarding ethics and so on, and what is across the curriculum otherwise. Or we'll be rather mixed up with our own statutory requirements regarding RE as a subject.
Are you suggesting, Hugh, that because this area of the curriculum is the one area that the LA is directly responsible, that however we refer to the subject, we need to be consistent with what's being done nationally?
Well, yes, it's a difference. It's a statutory part of the curriculum on its own, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a special part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
So that is standing, isn't it? That's a standing ask on us as a committee. And the full title of this document is an eithriad curriculum llawn, the full curriculum.
Can I put a bit of context in there? Sorry, just for those of you in terms of the education language, the phrase for RE, it comes under what's called the basic curriculum. So religious education and sex education comes under what's called the basic curriculum. And then you've got the national curriculum instituted in '88, which covers everything else. And so our religious education stood outside of the national curriculum, and it was a designation of the local authority as to what would be taught. I've been doing a little bit of history for a course I've been running on religious education, going back to 1604. Yeah, so when St Augustine appeared on the shores of Canterbury. But unbelievably, yeah. So the basic curriculum in 1870 instituted religious education. In '88, the national curriculum was instituted, and RE stands outside of that. Welsh Government are trying to incorporate the religious education into the humanities AOLE, but it can't change. It's not changing that part of the statutory law. So the law will still say that RE is part of the basic curriculum, and that's why they've used this phrase, the full curriculum, because what they're trying to say is that everything that is going to be encompassed in the curriculum from Wales 2022 will come under what they are calling the full curriculum. So it's just a way of saying that what is constituted as the basic curriculum and what they will have powers over regarding the curriculum for Wales, they want to cover the whole lot under the full curriculum. So they're trying to remove the right of withdrawal, obviously the name change, and the right of withdrawal from sex education as well.
But talking about the full curriculum doesn't alter the fact that what Hugh is basically saying, that the agreed syllabus is the responsibility of the LEA and us advising the LEA on that.
Yeah.
You know,
sorry,
and it's good. Sorry.
Just to say, well, the one of the main features of a SACRE, or for the local authority really, is to convene an ASC, an advisory council. Sorry, the ASC, the Agreed Syllabus Conference, sorry. So they've got to convene an Agreed Syllabus Conference. Now, at the Agreed Syllabus Conference, they can do a number of things. They can adopt something that's being passed on to them from a third party, like Welsh Government. They can create their own, or they can work with another local authority to create their own sort of agreed syllabus. So what Welsh Government are hoping is that the NAPFRE will be writing this, what's called the supporting framework. Welsh Government will make sure that that sort of tailors quite nicely to the new curriculum, and then an ASC will adopt that as the agreed syllabus moving forward, and then it becomes part of the full curriculum, if you like, because the ASC has agreed that the Welsh Government document will be our agreed syllabus. Slightly complicated, I know, but
but the key to that, isn't it, Phil, is that we have common agreements on this supporting framework.
Yeah, absolutely.
And NAPFRE and WASACRE are both working on that basis at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps we could just, I mean, I know it's the next item, but on those consultations, we're still waiting for an outcome. And it's absolutely key to folk in the schools being able to proceed. How far have we got on that?
So the first one was the right of withdrawals being removed. That's gone through, so Welsh Government decided that that's what they want to do. That then causes problems for some schools that Welsh Government don't feel are providing a pluralistic religious education. Jenny will know about this. And so they have tried to change the way that church schools would provide their religious education, and controlled schools, or aided schools, sorry, would have to provide a dual religious education for parents that would request that. I think that's going through, but we all know the political process at the moment. The Education Minister is looking to step down in March before the recess, and obviously there are elections coming up in the Senedd. We think that it would make sense that the legal process is finished before the recess, and then that leaves a legacy for the Education Minister. So I can imagine that this is sort of, it goes through its final legal checks, etc., through the Senate by March. Obviously I don't know that, but it would make sense that it's sort of finished and all closed, if you like, before the Senate closes for the re-elections.
Jenny, Annes, any comments on that? I mean, given the fact that there seems to be a clear undermining here of church of faith schools essentially, and being asked to actually provide a different curriculum other than the one that effectively parents have chosen that school for a particular purpose.
At the moment, I'm working with Elizabeth Thomas, who is our Provincial Director of Education, working with the Welsh Government on agreeing our definition from a Church of Wales perspective on pluralism. So we're in that stages at the moment. And at the moment, Welsh Governments are open to that discussion and open to that. So hopefully we'll have some agreement. I think it's important to note that our view from a Church in Wales view is different to that at the moment of the Catholic Church. So I think, you know, at the moment, all I can report is that the Welsh Government are open to the discussions that we're having with them.
Well, that sounds positive. Colette, any thoughts on that, just to clarify?
Yeah, it's not my role to be in on those discussions, but obviously our director is. We do have a different stance in that we're still lobbying that our church school, our Catholic schools don't have to offer the two curriculums.
Yeah.
The fact that it's a burden on our staff to be, you know, well versed in two curriculums seems very unfair. So that lobbying is continuing.
Yeah, I think basically there's a historical distrust here in terms of what faith schools are up to, and certainly as a head of a combined faith school, Anglican and Catholic, I'm very, very well aware of that. And a lot of the work that's been done since the 90s on progressing the way that our school, I thought historically our schools tackle that curriculum, hasn't really, I don't think, picked up by national government. And I think there's a lot of suspicion still out there. And I think the kind of collaboration that you're talking about, that will be very useful in actually allaying some of those fears, hopefully. Jenny, before we go on that, any thoughts? No, okay. Okay, question therefore, Phil, was not only on that, but on, let's move on. The supporting framework, okay? Absolutely key. People like Julia desperately waiting for it, and all her colleagues. Where have we got to on that?
Welsh Government, we're going to publish it in February. I was hoping to bring it up in the spring meeting. It was delayed due to COVID. Well, we don't know why it's been delayed. We presume it's been delayed due to COVID. We assumed it would be coming out in September. We are currently in, well, December tomorrow. The issues that we've got from a SACRE point of view, sorry, from a WASACRE point of view, is that it's going out to general consultation, which means that everybody and their grandma can have a comment about what's in that consultation. When you read one of the reviews for the previous consultations, they've said that they don't look at numbers. So it doesn't matter if lots and lots of WASACRE people respond, and then a few people with a very different agenda respond, they will take on those differing views because that's part of this process. Now, we need to see it from a SACRE point of view, and to comment from a SACRE point of view to shape what the consultation will look like. Otherwise, the consultation won't feed and support the redrafting as it needs to. Now, WASACRE are making this quite clear to Welsh Government that if it does go out to consultation, then it needs to be a two-stage process. It needs to go to SACREs first. SACREs need to shape this document and agree that that's right, because at the end of the day, it will be SACREs that will be agreeing this as their agreed syllabus. And then it can go out to a national consultation, knowing that WASACRE and SACREs are happy that it will go through, or possibly go through, as an agreed syllabus. So we don't know when Welsh Government are going to publish it. We would like them to publish it relatively soon, otherwise it's going to make our job very difficult, because we've only got 5 terms before the agreed syllabus, before the new curriculum starts, and therefore we needed to have gone through our agreed syllabus, go through the right channels, get teachers on board to agree that it's the right agreed syllabus for us. And actually, the longer they leave that, the less time we are going to have that. And interestingly, if we don't agree that it's an agreed syllabus, by the time 2022 comes around, then legally schools won't be able to implement that as their humanities, or to combine that within their humanities. So Welsh Government, hopefully, WASACRE are making Welsh Government aware of these issues, and that we need to get a bit of a move on, because otherwise they're leaving us, SACREs,
possible position.
Yeah, in a very difficult position.
Yeah. Phil, you did say that it will come back to individual SACREs, and legally that is right. But is there expectation at WASACRE, in fact, that there will be a unified view across the country on this?
So historically, in 2008, all 22 local authorities adopted the exemplar framework that was written by Welsh Government in collaboration with lots of education RE professionals. In a way, sorry about the background noise, in a way, that's exactly the same as this current process. So education professionals working with Welsh Government to provide the exemplar framework, or the framework as it's going to be called, and then hopefully we'll adopt it as our new agreed syllabus. It worked in the past. I can't imagine why it wouldn't work in the future, but obviously we need to see the supporting framework before we can confirm that that will be our way forward. I will go on mute now.
Phil, do local authorities have a role in this, given the fact that, you know, we are advising them, and this delay or slowing of the process and its lack of nip with the whole of, you know, the whole national curriculum, it's making our job incredibly difficult. Do they have a role in terms of the consultation?
I mean, again, it's down to us. We could advise that a letter's written, and we could possibly write that letter and ask them to forward that that request on. So yeah, I suppose so. I know WASACRE are on this one, and as SACREs, it's us that are going to be. We're going to have to work very hard in a very short space of time to bring about a result of the lateness of the framework.
Yeah. So, would that be something you would recommend we do then? Would it be useful to write? Yes.
So I'm having windows put in at the moment, so we've got a lot of drilling currently. It's the other side of that wall. Yeah, if I'd like to take a steer from Lowry on this one as well.
Yeah, I was hoping she might reappear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
sorry. Yeah, I think, Phil, let's have a discussion around it and consider it if we could.
Okay. So we'll leave that again as another, not something else to come out of your meeting with Lowry. And obviously, I'll, as everybody else is representative in this process, I'll knit in with whatever is agreed between us. Yeah. Yeah.
Could I just ask, Dr. Lowry, when is your next ADU meeting, and is it something that could be brought up amongst ADU? Because obviously
yes,
all the
it's
local
Friday. It's Friday, Phil. So
okay.
Yes, I can do that.
So could we formally then just sort of propose that Larry takes this to ADU and discusses it with them, and just raises that the profile of the framework?
Okay. Phil's proposing that. Can we? Oh, we can't propose it. Sorry, consultant. Can someone propose that, please? Julia's proposing it. Seconded. You. Okay. Faith. In favour? Unanimous. Chris and Mary? Okay. And Julia? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead on that, and we'll leave that to you and Lowry, and then you can come back to me on that, Phil. Okay. All right, item 12, potential development of themes within the ORE curriculum. Phil and I had a look at this. This is actually providing really access to materials on important matters to schools. We chose the Holocaust and Black Lives Matter for various reasons, but I'm going to hand over to Phil on this one.
Okay, just to say that the Holocaust Memorial Day happens in January, every January, and in one of the annual reports from another local authority, SACRE, they'd mentioned that they'd made a big thing about the Holocaust Memorial Day. And I was just thinking that as councillors and schools, you may be doing your own Holocaust Memorial events, or you'll be invited to various events. And whether in future SACREs in the spring, whether anybody would like to sort of provide a little presentation as to what they've received, because then that could go into a newsletter and then feed its way back into schools. I think if we got a bit more time as a SACRE, we might want to arrange something and create something for ourselves as a Holocaust Memorial Day. I know Roger's got a good contact in Llandudno, and he's done some good work with schools, getting Holocaust survivors in and stuff like that. So that's probably something for the future, but just to sort of highlight, if anybody wanted to mention something or even include in a newsletter their experiences of the Holocaust Memorial Day, then that would be relatively useful. Well, very useful, not relatively useful. And then secondly, the Black Lives Matter, RE Today have produced a plethora of resources for Black Lives Matter. It's very, very comprehensive. It's very, very detailed. It covers a whole area, and it's been supported by the Free Church Council of Wales, but it's not been translated, and that's one of the things that they've asked for. The Free Church Council of Wales have lobbied GWER and some of the local authorities to see if they will put some money forward to translate this large content of material. I don't know where we are with that and whether that's been agreed, but it's difficult to put forward links to an RE Today resource if there isn't an equity across both languages. So although there is all of this really good material out there, it does seem a bit unfair. We wouldn't be able to put it on a newsletter unless we were to phrase it in a particular way to say that maybe that there will be materials available. Well, hopefully there'll be materials available. Obviously, I can't make that decision. It would have to be down to SACRE, but there is a bilingual policy, so I feel that we wouldn't be able to promote that other than in your own conversations with schools, you might say that this stuff is available. But it's something that, again, we could look into, and I will hopefully feed back to SACRE where we are with translation in the spring.
Well, that's something we've highlighted already in the strategic report, this lack of available resources in the Welsh language, which is a really serious concern, quite honestly. But Chris, you had your hand up.
No, sorry, it was a soppy postman that was trying to say something to me outside. Absolutely soaked. I don't know whether all the mail's ruined.
Okay. Any comments from our professional educationalists here on this item?
Just add, you know, obviously I serve a predominantly Welsh community, and everything that we as a diocese publish have to be bilingual, and majority of the stuff is through the medium of Welsh. I suppose some of the concerns I have, I know they're useful resources, but just translating them doesn't meet the need. There has to be the cultural awareness and the relevance, especially given the developments in terms of the new curriculum and the Cynefin. So I think that there is, I've highlighted in Gwynedd, Conwy SACRE and in Anglesey, the need maybe for them to join up and commission a multi-faith piece of work and resources to meet the need, rather than having to go and just translate. And I think as a church in Wales, we've been fortunate this year. We've had, the pandemic has allowed us a time to look at how we communicate. And as a collective, as a province, we've done some work around asylums and Taith Advent and the Advent journey. And we kind of encountered this problem. So what we've done is used some, not the same resource, but similar books that have been written in Welsh to support. So I think there's you know, I'd be reluctant just to translate a document and use that as a resource, but maybe look at possibilities of commissioning pieces of work to Mudiad Ysgolion Sul, Aled, anybody like that, to be able to develop them, or the advisors that we've got, you know, locally or nationally.
Bill?
Do you know Bethan James?
Yes, I know Bethan James really well. We work with Bethan.
So Bethan and I had to put a proposal for Gware regarding this because it came out as a request from the Free Churches Council of Wales. And what we suggested was that they actually put a working party together to take the materials that have already been written and to find out whether they are relevant within the Welsh context. And then further than that, to make sure they fit in with the Curriculum for Wales context as well. So sort of like a two-step approach. And just interestingly, I was listening to an article on Radio 4 the other day about sort of Black Lives Matter in America compared to those in sort of the UK, and actually the context is quite different. And they had two speakers, and one was saying that actually the majority of Black Afro-American would come from slavery, but actually within the UK it's mostly immigration, and so actually it creates a very different platform for your own heritage if you're an immigrated Black Lives person, or whether you come from sort of a slavery background. And I just thought that actually if we're taking our steer from America, which some of this material is, especially when you're looking at Martin Luther King or some of the history of the civil rights movement in America, the context is very different in the UK. And actually if you take that a bit further and look at the Welsh dimension even further, it just exemplifies that work needs to be done to find that voice within the context in which we live, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, really good points there. Sorry, Hugh.
Going off the hyn hefyd.
Can I note also, I think, is it possible for some of us to have a look what's in the Black Lives Matter document, to see what's in there? But when the rural Welsh are in the question, or in Dyffryn, we don't have contact with stuff from America at the moment, and we need to look at this from the ethics of the stuff and also equality as a religion anyway. Is it possible for us to have a look at what's in this English document to start with, so we can have an opinion on it?
Sally, if I forward you the link that I've got from the Free Church Council, would you be able to forward that to members?
Yeah, that's fine, no problem.
Okay, so I think you just established a network, haven't we, for discussion on this. Phil, you'd be keen bringing this together.
No, well, so Gware are proposing that that Welsh government put a working group together, because it was the Welsh government in collaboration with the Free Church Council that were looking for a response. So I won't be given any time. I might be given time to do that, but who knows? It's out of our hands now. But we proposed that those that were seeking our advice would use that to translate and provide resources for education. But no, right, I haven't got. Yeah.
No. All right. Well, picking up Hugh's points, is there any way we can progress what Hugh was asking for? Larry?
Yeah. Sorry, Roger. I've got to leave now because I've got another commitment, I'm afraid. But Phil, shall we discuss it when we meet? And then bring it back to this?
Yeah. You're nodding, aren't you, Phil? Yeah. Okay.
Saying yes as well.
Yeah. And as you go, Larry, we're almost at the end, actually, in many ways. But I just want to express my appreciation of your presence and what you put into this meeting and how positive you've actually been. Because as you probably, as I know you'll be aware, in terms of the strategy that was outlining in the document that's been circulated, that the partnership with the LA was key. And this has been a very different concept in my view, not what you think, members, to our discussions in the future. It's felt incredibly professional this morning and also very positive in taking things forward. So I really want to thank you for being here, and I hope that will continue.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Roger. And it was good to be part of that discussion. And as I say, I'll meet with Phil. I think we've been a little bit in a time warp, haven't we, with the pandemic? You know, we've been so consumed by it. We're just approaching now a business as usual again. So I'll meet with Phil and then we'll go through the action list that's been agreed today. But yeah, many thanks. Diolch yn fawr. Hwyl bawb. Neis eich gweld chi. Hwyl. Ta-ra.
Right. Okay. Right. We'll move on then on that basis. Item 13. I wasn't obviously at this meeting. Phil, you were at this meeting, so can you take us through?
Yeah.
And then we'll note the minutes.
So part 3, the meeting was we held it electronically, which was very good. Colette was there, attended for
oh, sorry, Colette.
For no, we discussed SACRE's advice for schools during the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of the consortia, well, all of the consortia have provided blended learning advice for schools. I'm going to be working on some blended learning resources this week for religious education, and hopefully we can send those out as well. But in the current climate, sort of providing blended learning is the mixture of working from home because you're at home for whatever reason, you're being isolating or whatever, and then or working in school, and actually trying to create a seamless transition between the two is blended learning. So one moment you might be in school and the next moment you might be working from home, but actually teachers have already thought ahead and the resources are available digitally and the tasks are understood by pupils, and also the pupils can upload those pieces of work and then provide them back to the teachers to mark or to assess or to whatever. So there's lots of advice that was given out, and SACRE's supported that. Regarding the level 2 qualification that's just rumbled on and on and on and on and on regarding religious studies at Key Stage 4, Libby Jones, the chair of NAPFRE, and my counterpart in SACRE, they are creating a religious education level 2 qualification that will be similar to the short course as it was and accessible by anybody at Key Stage 4. So they're trying to create an examination qualification that will be accessible by everybody in Key Stage 4, and it will replace what the short course was previously to encourage schools, because as we know, a lot of schools are dropping their Key Stage 4 examination subject in favour of, well, maybe Welsh Baccalaureate or something else, but actually this will provide a qualification that their pupils can have, and they will be able to access, because some argue that the religious studies they aren't able to access. The supporting framework, as we mentioned, was discussed. The outcome of the SACRE elections, I was nominated by Denbighshire and they've accepted that I have now stepped on to the Welsh executive, the Welsh SACRE executive, as has John Meredith. Now we voted for both of those, or sorry, SACRE here voted for both of those, and they are now Welsh SACRE executives, or Association of SACRE executives. And then Tania Apshawn, who is co-opted to our SACRE, she has now stepped up as the vice chair for SACRE.
Well, everybody we voted for was elected.
So everybody we voted for, yeah. And then finally, professional learning was mentioned. So Welsh Government are committed to providing professional learning for all of the AOLE subjects. And in discussion with SACRE, it's been suggested that they're going to fund a person in each of the consortia, so the 4 regions across Wales. They will fund a person, full-time equivalent, to train within religious education for each of those areas. Now, all that really means is that money will be given to the consortia, and then it's up to the consortia on how they use that money. So I think what's been agreed has that a full-time equivalent person is made available in each of the local authorities, but whether in each of the regional consortia, but the regional consortia can use that money and divvy that money under the conditions that are set out by Welsh Government. So that might mean that they get a working party of teachers together. It might mean that they get a couple of people working sort of across the region, maybe a Welsh language and an English language person. So we don't know really, but there is a commitment from Welsh Government to provide this support, but how that support what it looks like in the end will be down to the regional consortia. So we can keep feeding back on that when we know more, because that's about as much as we know. That's probably as much as you need to know from the minutes, although the minutes are there and you can ask anything. Colette, you might want to chip in here. Is there anything I've missed?
No, I think that's everything. It did take a lot longer than that, mind you.
It did, yeah. As it does.
Okay, so it's a wait and see there, Phil, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good that regional support is being considered anyway, and that's very positive. The next item coming out of from WASACRE 13B is less positive and is of some concern. So we have to agree a response in light of the letter which was received back in January, I think it was, a long time ago now, to Directors of Education concerning Level 2 qualifications. And that for me is quite a serious issue, actually. So Phil, could you just guide us through it?
You'll note that the date of the letter is January, so it's quite a long time ago, and it was actually directed to the Directors of Education. So Dr. Lowry would have received one of those letters. WASACRE have let us have that letter, if you like. They've informed us that these are the letters that have gone out to directors, and we can advise the local authority. It's interesting that I've mentioned the Agored qualification that is currently being discussed, and I know that Libby wants it. I think it's going out for ratification January, so we could have a qualification ready to go in September, which would be really, really useful, and we can then advise the local authority to promote this in schools, and it will meet their statutory requirements at Key Stage 4. So although the letter is quite negative, and it is negative, it came out quite a while ago and a lot's happened since. I have had a look at the material that is mentioned in the last but one paragraph. The NCFE course, they reference this in the letter. It's they call it the Equality and Diversity course. No religious education can go in the course and it still be signed off and you receive the qualification. But on the other hand, you can fill it with lots of religious education and still have it signed off as a qualification. So it's not so much that it doesn't meet requirements, it's that it doesn't need to meet requirements, but it can do the opposite. So I've been working with a school in Rhyl, Sarah Roberts, who was the lead practitioner, and I've been working with her prior to lockdown, so this was in the spring term, and we were looking at a way of making sure that her NCFE qualification met the statutory requirements for religious education, and we found that it was really easy to do that and they would receive this qualification. But the issue is that schools can submit whatever they want and still get this equality and diversity qualification. So it's the plethora of material that's available doesn't meet our requirements in the sense that schools can do whatever they want and still come up with that qualification. But what we were hoping to do was create a course booklet content, if you like, that would meet the agreed syllabus and meet the requirements of this equality and diversity qualification, and then both parties would be pleased. The schools would be able to deliver something that was suitable for their type of children or in their context, and then it would meet the agreed syllabus as well. And then we could try and promote that in our SACREs, in our sort of local authority for schools that are doing the CFE course. But we have got this AGORID qualification that's going to hopefully be on board and live in September, and we can again promote that in schools. It would be nice actually if Ian could feed that back to the Heads Federation, the Secondary Heads Fed, to say that it would meet their requirements in secondary schools.
Yeah, because he's missing here. Like, he's a key player with regard to this. I mean, there was a clear deficit expressed in that letter in January. Can you just give us a flavour, very briefly, Phil, of the content of the AGORID, the ORE qualification?
Yeah, so it would be, as a person who taught the short course previously, it takes religious content but puts it in very much an ethical basis. So you might look at marriage, or you would look at euthanasia, or you would look at sort of things that are relevant to children and their pupils nowadays, but you would look around the religious contents that would inform people of faith as to their decisions regarding that. That's a little bit missing from the current specification, because it's a lot more sort of about theology and about the Trinity and about the nature of God. So it's going back to some of the, well, why am I learning what I'm learning? It's because people of faith have to sort of come up with these dilemmas, and it sort of puts it back into that context rather than looking at sort of the tenements of Christianity for the sake of an examination. Does that help, Roger?
Yeah, I find that very, very encouraging. I mean, you know, I'm not going to gloat here. It's all in anyway. But I mean, in the school I took over, we initiated for our own course for the lower levels of ability, people who didn't want to do the full ORE course, exactly of this nature, looking at all these particular issues. And it was very popular with the youngsters. It got a very high write-up. And when we were inspected, we got the award for the best teaching of Christianity in the UK from the Farmington group. So that was very encouraging. It's taken 30 years to actually roll out completely. And that in itself is disappointing, but it's a really positive thing to do. I think it will engage students. And if anybody wants, we produced textbooks at the time, by the way. My head of ORE, who was on the National Society body as well, very talented lady. And if you want to look at any of those materials, I'll be very happy to provide them, because in terms of what you outlined today, that's exactly what we provided. So just a thought on that one, Phil. And that's really encouraging to hear the progress on that. Final question on that. Given the fact that the secondary schools have already been going down the line, the initial line, what are the chances of them picking up on the AGORID qualification, do you think, providing it meets their equality and diversity requirements?
That's the million-dollar question. There's a lot of water gone under the bridge, and things can become quite, schools create habits quite quickly. And I think that if schools found that it's created a bit of time and space by developing and providing RE in a different way, they might be quite reluctant to go back. So I don't know what the answer to that one is, but we'd actually have to promote that and see the benefits that it actually meets the statutory requirements for religious education, which is actually...
If heads go down that line, having been a head, they're open to challenge.
Yeah.
Because they're not legally doing what they're required to do.
Which is what this letter's about in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's challenging the amount of time that pupils receive religious education at Key Stage 4.
Yeah, well, I think this is a really important issue. We need to monitor the progress on it as well. Any other further comments on that or feedback from you?
Can I just ask, how are we as SACRE getting some feedback from schools who are piloting, from secondary education point of view, piloting the new curriculum? because although I don't live in the county, but I have a year 7 son who they're piloting humanities. He's not clear whether this is geography, history or RE. And I think some of those initial kind of feedback could feed into the wider discussion, because they'll be piloting it this year, but they'll be going back next year to the old way of teaching with specific subjects. And I think, you know, there are clear lessons to be learned from the pilot schools who are piloting the new curriculum, and how does that feed into our discussions within this kind of forum, really?
Yeah, Phil, in terms of liaising on that, is there a way we can?
I was wondering, would Julia feedback on this?
Well, the secondary sector, well, it's both, but sorry.
So no, it's not so much about the sector, it's about the provision on how that experience of the pilot schools is coming back into the system.
Sorry, I stepped out then because I had to do something at lunchtime.
So the question was, so schools are piloting the new curriculum at the moment, so secondaries and primaries, and the messages and the key learning from that pilot, is there a central way of feeding any lessons learnt back regarding the new curriculum, or has that already been done under the pioneer schools?
That's already been done. I mean, I do think, you know, when the pandemic struck, I think a lot of the work towards the new curriculum kind of was put into suspended animation, really, because, you know, we went straight into developing blended learning models. So, for example, we're at what they're asking us to do reimagining of the curriculum this year, but the reimagining really is how we're adapting to the new situation we're in rather than the new curriculum. So we are still looking at the new curriculum, and we are, you know, because we were a pioneer school, weren't we? And I think we were going to do a presentation, I think, sometime on how we were delivering that, and we can still do that, because I think the teacher that I commissioned to do it, she actually did a presentation, and then I think it was, and then we didn't have a meeting or something. So we could do that at the next meeting if you want, from a foundation phase perspective, how we're delivering the new curriculum. So I think this work will start again, but I think at the moment, although nobody's saying the new curriculum is off the agenda, because it's not, is it? But I think there are probably other priorities. Do you think so? Well, that's how I see it.
The only reason I asked was because in a formal sense, that the piloting through the pioneer schools, they fed back their information regarding the Key Stage 3 humanities and the way that it's delivered. One of SACRE's and all of our concerns is that religious education gets lost in humanities, and it loses its identity. So I've done some training recently on if you were to teach Martin Luther King, the amount of RE teachers that teach Martin Luther King, but it's no more than a timeline, and it removes the religious education from Martin Luther King. You don't necessarily study the religion, you just study the history. And the same with India, you know, sort of in foundation phase, when you're looking at a topic of India and then you introduce Hinduism, but actually what's the expression of Hinduism in Wales? If it's okay learning about Hindus in India and that where it came from, but you miss that expression. And so I would, from our experience, the Key Stage 3 is difficult, because one school I know, they taught in a humanities way, but students felt that they were losing out, and that distinctiveness of a subject was disappearing, and they went back to subjects, just as Welsh Government was saying, actually, no, you need to teach in a humanities way. Now, there are other schools that are going to take a topic and say, right, let's divvy a topic between the history department, the RE department, and the geography department. And that works a lot better, because the RE has still got its flavour and says, well, I'm going to take that element of Martin Luther King. History say, well, I'll take that element of Martin Luther King. And geography say, well, we'll look at an American whatever. And that works much better. Now, there is an Estin good practice document that's just come out looking at curriculum design and experiences that schools have had, and that is taken on as an example. I can't remember the name of the school now, but the school divvies up the topic amongst the 3 subjects, and that's quite successful. Whereas my concern, like your concern, is that if it's done in a humanities department. Now, I taught humanities at year 7, and I've got to say that my year 7's got a better RE deal than they did a geography and history deal. And when chatting with pupils, those that had a geography teacher in their year 7 humanities had a better geography deal than they had a history and an RE deal. So these are concerns, but in terms of the pilot, that's already been done, I'm afraid, and the messages are already there. It's now about picking up good practice from other schools and saying, actually, that's really good. And then also RE teachers within schools saying, look, I'm being lost out here. What can I do to just raise my voice and make sure that RE is distinctive and taught in the school? So it's something.
I think.
Sorry, Julia.
That's what Annes was highlighting was the need to pick up on good practice where it's really working and making sure that gets spread across more schools than it may be. We don't know. And we have to recognise what Julia is saying, obviously. The schools with the COVID pandemic, in terms of their priorities, have had much bigger issues, just basically getting learning and teaching in place. However, sorry, Julia.
I was just going to say, because we went to all the pioneer meetings. I think it was harder in secondary than it was in primary. Yeah. I do think, and what Phil's talked about, that was my experience working with the humanities, was that secondary teachers were dividing the topics up, the themes across the year, so that one half term it would be an RE theme, another half term it would be a history theme, then it would be a geography theme. And I think business, I'm not sure if business came into that as well at some point. So I think it's to have a common sense approach really to this within high schools. But I think it's not, and I'm sure Colette, as an ex-primary head, would agree with me, it's easier for us in a primary school, isn't it, really?
Yeah. You don't have the subject barriers that are erected in the same way in secondary schools. I mean, for what it's worth, I'll just reflect, but in the 1970s, as a young teacher starting out, I was involved in a joint humanities project, and it didn't work. And for all the reasons that have been partially referred to by Phil previously. And so when I became a head in the 90s, and the LEA wanted me to introduce combined humanities, I resisted it completely. And because I was an aided school, I was able to do that. And so we stayed with separate subjects, particularly with our RE. And in the end, at the end of all that, the LEA came back and said, you're so good at this, we think you should become a humanities specialist school. So they were actually tacitly almost agreeing that at secondary level, that had been a very effective way of delivering the curriculum. But Donaldson's gone back to the 70s. So I kind of grieve at that to some extent, but never mind. But I think it's entirely appropriate in the primary sector because it worked. It really does work. Hugh.
Mae hwn wedi bod yn broblem ac yn broblem arbennig yn yr
This has been a problem in the secondary school, as Julie has said, but there's some things additional to RE as well, because we look at the staffing structure for the curriculum in the future. In these years, we have to stick to a curriculum that is stuck with these themes that are changing. So coming back to these subjects in exams is the questions about secondary schools having leaders for every subject. Is there going to be an exam all over the curriculum, or is the exam going to be dependent on information on subjects, individual subjects? So the secondary schools have to change in these next years, and we're not sure where we're going at the moment.
It's very difficult, Phil, isn't it? Sorry, Hugh. I mean, I'm not really on top of this, but my impression at the moment is that certainly within Wales, that we might not be having examinations in the next couple of years that we might be moving to teacher assessment. And therefore, where teacher assessment is particularly led by a specialist in one subject rather than another, it becomes a much more complex issue, I think, possibly. But I think it's going to have to watch this space with regard to this and see what actually happens. I mean, we are aware that this is a clear issue in the secondary sector in particular, and I think we just need to keep our eye on it and act appropriately when the time comes. Okay. If Phil's gone, the only thing that he hadn't touched on from SACRE was professional learning. So I think we can probably, we can let that pass. The date of our next meeting, any further, before I leave that, any further comments on SACRE feedback? Are we happy to move on? Yeah, okay. Sally, can you help us out, the date of the next meeting?
If you give me a general idea of when you're hoping to hold it, I'll have to go back and look at what other committees we have, and I'll have to get back in touch with you. It depends on obviously availability at this end.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, Phil's unfortunately not here, but we've got plenty of professionals around the table. In terms of the way the whole things are actually progressing at the moment, and obviously about the positive response we've had from Laura this morning, I'd want to move sometime into the spring term. I didn't want it in the early part for obvious reasons with the pandemic, but I think before we get to the close of the spring term, probably I personally would suggest we have it sort of late mid half term period. I don't know what people think. Phil, we're looking at a date for the next meeting and the most appropriate time. I've just suggested late mid-term in the spring term.
We normally try and get a meeting in before the SACRE meeting, and the SACRE meetings they try to put towards the end of the term so that SACREs could have met prior to the, is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. So I'm afraid I'm trying to look for diaries.
Well, Sally's going to come back to us on this anyway, because she's got to look at the overall diary.
Yeah, if you let me know, Phil, and then I can check the availability here, obviously with other committees and things like that.
Yeah. Are we able to get a year's worth of dates agreed in one go, Sally?
Or possibly, maybe not quite that much, but we could probably definitely plan ahead a bit more than we do now. Make it easy for everybody, I think, won't it?
So in the spring term, if we can have at least the summer terms meeting in the diary already. Okay,
yeah, no problem.
Brilliant.
That'd be really good. And it sounds as though from what you're saying, Phil, that my suggestion of late mid-spring term, that particular period for Sally to look at, because it'll get something in before SACRE, it's probably a good time, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Right, well, thank you for the survivors. We got through. And again, for your contribution. I personally feel I am very encouraged by this morning's meeting, personally, as I've already shared. And I think we're actually making some progress. And I'm really, really feeling positive about the response that Laura's actually given. And it means that the strategic plan, when we come to look at it, might very well have a lot of legs. And in fact, I was sharing with Libby about what we were going to try and achieve in Conwy. And she said that she really wants keeping in touch on this, because she thinks if we have a reasonable amount of success in Conwy, it could be a template to roll out across LLEAs across the country. So that would really enhance what we're actually doing here. Positive. So a big thank you for all your contributions. And I'll be in touch, Phil, as soon as this meeting's over. We'll have a get on WhatsApp just to pick up on one or two things. Big thank you. See you next time. Take care. God bless.
Bye. Thank you.